And welcome. It is Monday and it's time for our 5-star live stream with your deal doctor. Here we are. I get this question a lot, so I thought that it would be a good topic for one of our sessions, and we'll make it today's a topic. I get the question quite often, what is the difference between a dual commission arrangement and dual agency? They sound a lot alike. They are terms that are not interchangeable. They mean very, very different things. And what it means is dual commission arrangement. Let's take that one first. A dual commission arrangement. Let's say that you sit down with a potential listing seller and you say to them, listen, here's the deal. If I sell your house and there's another agent involved, which is going to happen most of the time, I will sell your house at let's say 6%. That's the and half of that is going to go to me, and half of that's going to go to the agent. Let's just, for an example, use that phrase. But I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Here's the deal. If I sell your house at myself, and there's no other agent involved, there's no other representation involved, I will do it at 4%. So you got 6% if there's another agent involved, or 4% if I'm the only agent involved. That is a dual commission arrangement, and it must be disclosed on the MLS. If you reach that arrangement and you write up your phraseology in the listing contract, then you must disclose it on the MLS. And that's where a lot of agents get into trouble, because they may have that agreement with their sellers, and it may be verbal, which obviously is not necessarily enforceable, but very often it's in writing. And even though it's in writing, they don't submit it to the MLS. So that is a dual commission arrangement. If you are challenged on that, if an agent says to you, oh, by the way, I see that on the MLS you've disclosed that you have a dual commission arrangement, what is the margin? What is the differential between the regular commission, which is a total of 6%, 3 and 3. What's the differential on the other agent, on the dual commission arrangement? And you have to tell them. In this case, it's 4%. How that is going to be divided, obviously, in a case where you're offering a 3% co-brokerage fee, you are going to be, as the listing agent, cutting your fee down to 1%, but you also get the buyer agent fee, so you get the whole 4%. But the point is that if another agent challenges you and says, hey, what's the difference here? Because if I write an offer under a dual commission arrangement, and charge 4% on a $100,000 purchase price, just to make it easy numbers, then my seller's net before other closing costs is $96,000, right? Well, the other agent deserves to know what they're up against, what creates a level playing field. So you have to disclose what that differential is if you are asked. And frankly, in fairness to other agents, I usually put it in the agent remarks. I usually indicate that the differential is 2%, or I say that if a dual commission arrangement exists for if I sell it myself, if the listing agent sells it without another agent involved, the total commission is going to be 4%. I spell it out for other agents because, first of all, I think it's the ethical thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. that agents should know what the rules of the game are. So I encourage people to be upfront about it. If you've got a dual commission arrangement, you have to disclose it on the MLS and that you have one. And if you're challenged, you have to tell them what it is, so that they know that in order to meet your offer, they're going to, in the case that I gave of a $100,000 offer, they're going to have to write at least $102,000, right? I mean, rough numbers. $102,000 will, at 6%, deduct 6%, is going to give you a $96,000 offer before the seller's closing costs. That's just the commission. So it's really important. Now, the question I get a lot is, can I advertise that? No. Five-star policy is we cannot use bait. We cannot use commission as bait. And advertising a dual commission arrangement would be considered using it as bait. That say, hey, I'll give you a 6% commission, but just so you know, if I sell it myself, I'm going to do it for 4%. Or 5% or whatever it might be. You can't go out and post that on Facebook. You can't send flyers or letters or emails to your clients that say, this is the deal I'll make you, because that five-star has policy specifically against using commission as bait and advertising it accordingly. Now, if this conversation happens at a listing table, that's perfectly okay. You're entitled to do that, but you can't go out and advertise it. The question I get a lot too is that what happens when you do a dual commission agreement? Are you then automatically a dual agent? And the answer is no. In fact, as I've said in virtually every other thing I've done, avoid dual agency as often as you possibly can. Only under situations where you can't avoid dual agency should you ever find yourself in dual agency. But a dual commission arrangement, which means that you are the only agent involved, means that you're going to get that 4% commission, but you're not necessarily a dual agent. You only become a dual agent if you go into disclosed dual agency. Non-disclosed dual agency is illegal. So the only way you can go into dual agency is to allow both parties, or to get the approval of both parties that you can be a dual agent. That's the only way you can go into dual agency legally. So the commission has nothing to do with it. The only thing that dual agency involves is representation. Who are you representing? The fact that you're collecting a commission because you are collecting the buyer's agency commission, or a portion of that buyer's agency commission, has nothing to do with whether or not you are representing them whatsoever. So I just wanted to clear that up. I know we get that question a lot, and it can be a little bit confusing. The other question we got recently last week was, can you be a dual agent on your own property? And the answer is unequivocally no. We have had numerous conversations to verify this information. But if you own the property, if you are a part owner of the property, if your LLC, which has 3 owning members, principal members, is the owner of the property, and you're one of those 3, you cannot be a dual agent, because you're not going to convince any judge in the world that you are looking out for that buyer's interests equally to that of your own interests. It's just a pure, unadulterated conflict of interest. And again, it came up last week. I had Gail Anderson on the phone about it. This is just one of those areas that's black and white. And what we are seeing now is Lara enforcement. Lara is stepping forward and bringing agents in front of them who have claimed dual agency when they are selling their own property. So I caution you that if you are selling your own property, whether it's part of an LLC that you belong to or individually, don't even think about doing dual agency, because it will not stand up in court. You'll basically be handing over your commission check, if not more. Remember who you represent, and again, it's hard to convince any judge that you're a legitimate dual agent if you're selling your own property. Another thing that came up, which I think is kind of important, is writing stuff into the buy-sell, personal property. We had a situation last week where an item was perceived to be a fixture. It was thought to be permanently affixed. What we don't necessarily have at this point is proof, now that the sale is closed and this item of property is missing because the seller took it. At this point, we haven't been able to prove that this was in fact affixed, a permanent fixture within the property. And I will tell you that very often a judge is going to look at this, a situation like this, and say, what was the intent of that item on the property? What was the seller's intent? Was there a general understanding that the buyer or the seller was going to take the item with them? I'll give you a story of my own. I think I've done this before, about the hot tub. And I failed to write into the buy-sell that the hot tub was to remain with the home. It was listed on the listing card. We wrote over full price. By all MLS rules, it should have been included, but I didn't stipulate it on the purchase agreement because I thought it was a fixture. It had its own hard plumbing. It had a cement pad. It had its own electrical system hooked up to it underground. I don't know how much more is required to establish that something is affixed to the property. But when we spoke to the attorney, and we sat down with the attorney after the fact when the seller took it, and we discovered after closing that it was gone, the attorney said a judge is going to look at the intent. Did the seller intend to leave it from the very beginning? Was it expressly written into the listing contract? And the answer was no. What we discovered is that the listing agent put it on the MLS sheet, but the listing contract itself never actually had it on there. So I say to you, that cost me $3,000, by the way, because I felt it was my fault for not expressly putting that personal property, or what I saw to be a fixture, in the purchase agreement. I ended up writing a check to buy them a hot tub. So when in doubt, write it in the PA. Don't assume that because it is attached with bolts or screws, nailed to the wall, glued on, don't assume that an item is a fixture If you have any questions at all, make sure that you include it in the purchase agreement. So those were just a couple of things that came up last week. Survey. We get this question a lot, and again, I know I've covered it before, but the importance of a survey came up again last week because once the buyer closed, we discovered that the pole barn was partly over the property line, the neighbor's property line. And come to find out, there was no survey done. Well, I'm not exactly sure why any agent would recommend to their buyer against having a survey performed. In meets and bounds areas, they can be expensive. There's no question. But if you're going to buy $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 or $500,000 piece of property, it would seem to me that it's really important that you understand what you're buying, what the boundaries are of the property you're buying. Surveys are going to, a boundary survey is going to indicate to you things like drainage easements, right-of-way easements, private easement agreements that neighbors have made toward one another so that they can build a driveway or traverse the land to get to the neighbor's parcel. So we find very often that buyers and sellers don't have a clear understanding of where the boundaries are. The property changes hands, and lo and behold, the buyer finds out that the swimming pool they just built, 14 feet of it is on the neighbor's property. So again, I encourage you to make sure that when you're selling a house or property, any kind, surveys are really, really important. I just would never sell a house or a property today without a survey. They're just too important. Well, I think we're already past our 15 minutes, but I'll be here doing a little bit of work if anybody wants to throw a question my way. I also want to encourage you all to sign up. Sign up for the Con Ed. It's free. We're 5 Stars providing it, but more importantly, I think we create the Con Ed based on experiences real experiences that 5 Star agents have had over the past year. We take those information, those experiences, we turn it into questions and answers. And this year we have a new, exciting, interactive platform that we're going to be using, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that people will enjoy change of pace. So be sure that when you get notice, I think there was just a notice sent out today, that you get your Con Ed notice that you sign up, because it's going to be kind of a cool thing. January 30th. And we've got a couple of good speakers, and then me too. So, but I won't be speaking nearly as much as I usually do. Because it's of this cool interactive gizmo app thing. That's a technical term. I think that, isn't that, Dom? That's a technical term, a gizmo app thing? Yeah, okay. Dom gave me the thumbs up on that. So, again, I'm going to sit here for a bit. Fire me a question if you like. In the meanwhile, I am going to answer a couple of emails, but I'll be right here. What's that?
We have a question.
We have a question. Penny. Hey, Penny. If a seller suspects that their shed may be on the neighbor's property but has a great relationship with that property neighbor, are the sellers responsible for a survey before they list it? No. They're not responsible for it before they list it. In fact, they're not responsible at all, the buyer, but they are responsible for disclosure. So if they suspect that it may be on their neighbor's property, they have a responsibility to disclose that it may be on their neighbor's property. They have to disclose what they know, not what they are absolutely certain of. And I think that's the difference. In this case, if they suspect that the shed is partly on the neighbor's property, they should disclose that. A survey will determine that. Who pays for that survey is a matter of negotiation in the purchase agreement. Doesn't necessarily mean that the seller has to pay for it. The buyer can pay for it. But especially in this kind of a situation, I would encourage someone to pay for it so that you know, buyer and seller, whether or not that shed is on somebody else's property, or you get a hold harmless sign that says, we the buyers are going to hold 5-star harmless for any future liability if we discover that our new shed or our shed on our new house is on the neighbor's property. So I encourage a survey, especially in that case. It is a matter of negotiation who pays for it. Chris Fazer. Do I need to disclose I'm a realtor if I'm purchasing in Florida? That would be a question for a Florida realtor. I don't know the answer. I don't know if Florida law requires disclosure that you are an agent in Michigan or not. I know that in Michigan, it is required that you disclose that you are an agent licensed in the state of Michigan, but you'd have to ask Florida about their laws. Any questions?
That's it for now.
That's it for now. Okay. On a dual commission arrangement, let's be clear on the language here. On a dual commission arrangement, the 4% is only if the listing agent sells it, correct? And I was using 4% as an example. It can be whatever you negotiate with your seller. But if you are selling it yourself and you have made a deal with the seller that you're going to reduce your commission if you sell it yourself, then yes, that whatever that amount is, whether you say the full commission is going to be 6%, but it's going to be 5 or 4 or 3 if I sell it myself, that's all a matter of negotiation. But it only applies if you sell it yourself. And as I said before, it has to be disclosed that you have a dual commission arrangement in place to your MLS so that agents know that you as the listing agent have an advantage when you're writing a buyer's offer. Hope that helps. If not, write back and make me clarify it if you need it. Okay? Karen, how can we enter into a dual commission arrangement? I'm going to change that word every time it comes up as an agreement. Dual commission arrangement and bring the buyer and not be a dual agent and not be in dual agency. When you sell your own listing, you don't automatically go into dual agency. No matter what the commission is, no matter what commission arrangement you have, whether you're doing a straight 6 or 7 or 8 or 5%, none of that matters as it regards the issue of agency and representation. The only thing that matters is whether or not you are intending to represent or attempting to represent both parties at the same time. The fallacy of dual agency is that you can represent either of them. The problem is that there is a built-in conflict of interest in dual agency itself. You immediately, while it's legal, you immediately limit the scope of your fiduciary responsibilities because they clash. They butt heads. I can't keep your confidence and disclose what I know. Those are two tenets of agency. One is that I disclose whatever I find out to my seller client, and the other is that I keep confident any secrets that, like motivation or price that I might offer for my buyer clients. So those two tenets of agency are in direct competition, direct conflict with one another. If you're going to engage, if you're going to be the sole agent in a transaction, I would strongly recommend that you remain as a seller's agent if you have the listing. There's no reason not to. unless you have already have a buyer's agency contract with that buyer, or you have a strong personal relationship with that buyer, such as it might be a family member or a friend of 20 years or something like that, in which case it's going to be very difficult for you to not find yourself in a dual agency position. If you do find yourself unable to avoid dual agency, obviously you have to get it disclosed in writing before you can present an offer. Both parties have to agree to it, that you are going to represent them in this transaction. And then you're really handcuffed as far as the amount of information you can provide to one or the other. You can't give any information to one party that could give them an advantage in the transaction over the other party. And that's a very, very fine line to tread. So the commission arrangement has nothing to do with dual agency. If you are going to write an offer yourself on your own listing, I would encourage you to make every attempt to stay in the seller's agency position. Hope that's clear. David, where do you state a dual commission arrangement exists on the listing agreement, as well as the commission percentage amount for a dual commission? On the listing contract, it could be other conditions or exceptions. Anywhere you want to put there's a place to put it. You can say, if listing agent sells the property himself or herself, the seller will be charged a total of, let's say, 4% commission. By the same token, you can put that in the agent comments on the MLS. That's your choice. Frankly, I give an indication both in the marketing remarks and in the agent comments. And the reason that I do that when I have a dual commission arrangement in place is that I want the public to understand that this is not something that is being done underhandedly. It's out in the open. Everybody knows the rules. Everybody knows the margin, the differential between the two commissions. We're not trying to hide or scam anybody. The information is there, and you, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer, as well as the agent, are aware of it going into writing an offer. So I hope that answers your question, David. And we're about 5 minutes out past our time. But again, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week. Have a great day.